What would you do if you found a wild, injured bobcat hiding under your porch? Most people would call animal control. Some might run. But in this story, a tiny toddler did something no one expected and changed everything. This isn't just a tale of an animal in need. It's a story about the healing power of innocence, quiet trust, and a bond between a child and a wild creature that defied every rule of nature. So get ready, because what starts as a moment of fear becomes a lifelong lesson in empathy and love. Before we dive into this extraordinary journey, be sure to subscribe to Pawprints Forever, the home of heartwarming animal stories that will make you believe in second chances again. Like this video, share it with someone who needs a smile today, and comment below where in the world you're watching from. We love hearing your stories too. Now lean in, because the wild is about to whisper something unforgettable. The sun rose slow and golden over the sleepy town of Pine Hollow, casting its light across frost-tipped pines and quiet, winding roads. Nestled in the woods at the edge of town was a modest blue farmhouse with smoke curling from its chimney and a wide front porch that creaked when the wind blew through the valley. It was the sort of place where stories settled like mist. And on this particular morning, a story had already begun. But no one knew it yet. Not even the bobcat hiding beneath the porch. Ava Prescott was the kind of mother who loved the quiet. She had once lived in the city, bustling and bright, but something about motherhood had drawn her away from the noise and closer to nature. She had found the farmhouse by accident, an online listing no one else had claimed. "This place has stories," the listing said. She hadn't understood it then. But she would. Soon. Her 1-year-old son, Jamie, was just learning to walk, more toddling than stepping, really. He wobbled like a little wind-up toy, giggling at everything, especially their golden retriever, Rusty, who followed him like a bodyguard with a wagging tail. On this morning, Jamie stood by the screen door, hands pressed to the glass, eyes wide. He was staring out at the porch, and something under it. Rusty paced nervously near the door, ears up, tail stiff. Ava looked up from her coffee and noticed both of them frozen in place. She stepped over and peered outside, half expecting a raccoon or possum rummaging for food. But the shadow that moved beneath the porch wasn't small. And it wasn't slow. It was a bobcat. It took her a moment to process what she was seeing. The wild animal's fur was mottled and dirty, the tufted ears twitching. One of its front legs was held up awkwardly, as if injured. Its amber eyes locked with hers for the briefest second, just long enough for Ava to feel the fear, the desperation, and the pain in them. Then it backed further into the shadows. She pulled Jamie gently away from the door and held him close. "It's okay, baby, it's okay." But her mind was racing. A bobcat, injured right beneath her porch. She called animal control, who promised to send someone later that day, but with their small-town staff spread thin, it might be hours. "Don't approach it," they warned. "Could be dangerous. Might lash out." Ava nodded. She wasn't planning to, but something about the way the animal had looked at her. It didn't feel like danger. It felt like surrender. Outside, Rusty continued to pace by the porch steps, occasionally barking low. Jamie, watching from the living room window now, pressed his small palm against the glass and murmured something Ava couldn't quite make out. She leaned closer. "What, honey?" He pointed. "Kitty. Hurt." She blinked. It wasn't just a baby's guess. He knew. Hours passed and the animal control officer still hadn't arrived. Ava kept Jamie inside, distracting him with toys and snacks, but every now and then he would crawl to the door, peek out and whisper softly, "Kitty's still there." By late afternoon, Ava stepped onto the porch with a flashlight and a slow, careful step. She crouched, angled the beam into the dark crawl space, and there it was. The bobcat. Curled now, breathing unevenly, still alert but fading. And that's when she noticed something strange. The animal wasn't growling. wasn't baring its teeth. It was watching her, like it wanted her to see. The sound of Jamie's giggle broke the quiet. He had wriggled past her and crawled onto the porch. Before she could stop him, he was peeking under the railing. The bobcat's head lifted. Ava froze. But nothing happened. The two stared at each other, wild animal and toddler, no barrier but breath and space. Jamie didn't cry, didn't run. He just said softly, "Hi, Kitty." And to Ava's astonishment, the bobcat blinked, slowly, as if in recognition. That evening, after Jamie went to sleep and Rusty lay curled at his feet, Ava made a decision. She brewed a pot of chamomile tea, bundled herself in a blanket, and sat on the porch with a bowl of raw chicken left just outside the crawl space. She didn't push it close, didn't try to lure the animal, just offered. The bobcat didn't move at first, but as night deepened and the stars glittered above, the creature crept forward, sniffed, ate, and retreated again. Still watching her, still waiting. When Ava looked into those amber eyes, she felt it. This wasn't just about a wild animal. This was something else. Something that had found its way to her family, not by accident, but by instinct. And in the days to come, that instinct would bloom into a bond no one would believe, all because one baby chose kindness, when the world would have chosen fear. The following morning, Ava rose early. She hadn't slept much, not out of fear, but out of something else, a strange, unshakable sense that something important had begun beneath her home, something sacred. Before Jamie woke, she wrapped herself in a sweater and crept out to the porch. The small bowl of chicken she'd left the night before was licked clean, pushed gently aside, and beneath the floorboards, tucked back into shadow, a pair of golden eyes blinked slowly at her. The bobcat hadn't left. She crouched and spoke softly. "I see you." The cat didn't growl, didn't retreat. It simply watched her, head tilted slightly as if trying to understand why she hadn't chased it away. Ava stood and turned to go inside, pausing only to set down another dish, this time with fresh water. She didn't dare get closer, but she could offer, and sometimes that was enough. When Jamie toddled into the kitchen a half hour later, dragging his stuffed bear by one leg, he went straight for the window. "Kitty's still there," he said. Ava smiled. "Still there, baby." He nodded, like it was the most natural thing in the world. Around noon, Animal Control finally called. "We're swamped," the officer apologized. "If it's still there, you'll want to keep everyone indoors. They're unpredictable, especially if they're wounded." Ava hesitated. "What happens when you get here?" "Well, if it's injured, we'll trap it. Depends on its condition. Might go to wildlife rehab. Might have to be put down. Can't say till we see it." Her stomach turned. She glanced out the window. The bobcat was visible now, curled in a patch of sunlight just beyond the edge of the crawl space, one paw still lifted, ribs rising and falling slowly. It didn't look violent. It looked exhausted. Alone. Ava's voice was quiet. "I'll call you if anything changes." Then she hung up. That afternoon, while Jamie napped and Rusty stood sentinel by the window, Ava sat on the porch again. She brought her notebook. She hadn't written in it for months, not since the move, but now words came like the thaw of spring. Day 1. The cat came broken, but stayed. Maybe it knows something I don't. Maybe kindness doesn't ask for permission. She looked up from the page. The bobcat's head was resting on its good leg, eyes half closed, still watching her, still choosing to stay. That evening, Ava prepared a mixture of shredded chicken and broth. She placed the bowl at the edge of the porch, careful not to move too quickly. The bobcat didn't stir immediately, but just after sunset, It rose and limped toward the dish. She noticed more now. Its ribs weren't just thin, they were gaunt. The injured leg was raw, the fur matted with dried blood and dirt. Still, it moved with quiet dignity, as though it refused to be reduced to helplessness. It didn't eat like an animal in panic. It ate like one who had waited to be seen. As the days passed, a rhythm formed. Morning, water, afternoon, food, evening, watching. Jamie, despite being so young, seemed to understand that the kitty was special. He didn't scream or chase. Instead, he'd press his tiny palm to the window and whisper, "Be okay." And somehow, that whisper always came when the bobcat needed it most. On the third night, something unexpected happened. Ava opened the door to bring the evening dish outside and found the bobcat already waiting, closer now, just a few feet from the steps, sitting upright, eyes calm. She froze. The bowl trembled slightly in her hands. But the cat didn't move, didn't growl. It trusted her. She set the bowl down gently and stepped back. The bobcat padded forward, slower now, more deliberate. Its gait was strained. The front paw barely touched the ground. As it ate, Ava noticed something else. Its breathing was shallow. And its eyes, they weren't wild anymore. They were pleading. That night she sat up reading everything she could about injured wildcats. Most sites warned, don't approach, don't feed, don't interfere. But the few forums from wildlife rescuers told another story. Sometimes, one post read, an animal will choose its human, not the other way around. Another said, fearful animals flee, dying animals hide. But if one approaches you, even limping, even injured, don't ignore the message, you're being trusted. By dawn, Ava made her decision. She wouldn't call animal control. She'd call someone else, someone who wouldn't treat the bobcat as a threat, but as a creature in need. She found the number for a nearby wildlife rehab center, a place run by a woman named Jolene Graves. Known for her quiet work with foxes, owls, and the occasional mountain lion, she had a reputation in the region as a kind of wildlife whisperer. Ava called, explained everything, every detail. And when she finished, Jolene didn't hesitate. I'll come, but I won't bring a trap unless I have to. I'll bring sedation in case we need it, but if he's choosing you, we'll do this gently. The next morning, Jolene arrived. She was tall, silver-haired, with steady eyes and a voice like warm tea. She carried a small duffel bag and wore soft leather gloves. Rusty watched her with curiosity but didn't bark. Jamie waved from the window and whispered, "Fix Kitty." Jolene crouched beside the porch and peered beneath. The bobcat was there, awake, alert, but not afraid. Jolene whistled softly. "Well, you've made quite the friend, haven't you?" They waited for sunset, for the bobcat's evening ritual. And when he stepped out, Jolene moved slowly, whispering the entire time. Ava didn't know what she was saying. It sounded more like prayer than conversation. Then, with a practiced hand, Jolene raised a small syringe. Not to harm, but to help. The bobcat flinched as the dart touched fur, then settled, then slowed, and finally slept. Wrapped in a thick blanket, the animal was carried gently to Jolene's truck. Jamie watched wide-eyed as they passed. He whispered one final time, "Be okay." And Ava held her breath, because deep down she knew that whisper might have saved him. The house felt strangely quiet after the bobcat left. Ava stood on the porch long after Jolene's truck had disappeared down the winding road. The empty space beneath the floorboards, once filled with breath and golden eyes, now felt like an unfinished sentence. Even Rusty seemed unsettled, pacing between the living room window and the front door. Jamie, however, seemed content, as if in his small, unshakable heart he knew the kitty would come back, healed. He toddled around with his usual curiosity, but occasionally stopped at the porch steps and whispered, "Kitty sleepy now. Kitty get better." That evening, Jolene called from the wildlife center. He's stable, she said. Sedation went smooth, no fractures, thank God, but the leg's infected. Pretty bad. Could have gone septic if you hadn't stepped in. Ava's heart dropped. Will he be okay? He will now, Jolene answered. He's strong, has some age on him, but he's a fighter. We cleaned the wound, started antibiotics and gave him fluids. We'll monitor him over the next few days. He's got a shot. Ava exhaled. Thank you. Truly. Jolene paused, her voice softening. Most people would have ignored him. Or worse. He came to the right place. Days passed. Each one slower than the last. Ava kept herself busy, working from home, tending to Jamie, making sure Rusty stayed occupied. But her thoughts drifted often to the rehab center, to the Bobcat sleeping in recovery. And Jamie never let a day pass without saying, Kitty, come back soon. On the fourth day, Jolene sent photos. One showed the Bobcat resting on clean straw, eyes half open but alert. The second, he was sitting upright, his weight shifted off the injured paw, but posture proud and almost regal. Ava smiled. She showed Jamie. That's your friend, she said. Jamie beamed. He looks better. Over the following week, the photos continued. Each one showed progress, the wound healing, the eyes brighter, the body regaining strength, but it wasn't just physical. In each photo, the Bobcat looked calmer, less like a wild animal, more like something in between. Still fierce, still untamed, but connected now, as if that porch and the little boy behind the glass had left an imprint on his soul. Jolene's next call came with a proposition. I've been watching him closely. He doesn't pace like the others, doesn't flinch when I approach. He even eats while I'm in the enclosure. That's rare. Ava listened, heart thudding. I think, Jolene continued, that he's not meant for the deep wild. Not anymore. He's imprinted on you, your space, that child. Ava swallowed. Are you saying he should come back? I am, carefully, controlled, but yes. He chose you once. I think he still would. The day of his return felt surreal. Jolene arrived just after sunrise in the same truck, but this time the Bobcat was awake, alert behind a reinforced steel mesh crate. He looked directly at Ava as she approached. No growl, no tension, just familiarity. Jamie peeked out the screen door and gasped. Kitty came back. The Bobcat's ears perked. Rusty barked once from inside, then grew quiet. Ava stepped closer, crouched, and whispered, You remember us, don't you? The cat blinked. Slowly. They had agreed not to release him into the full wild. Instead, Jolene had helped Ava prepare a protected space in the fenced-in woods behind the farmhouse, a small enclosure built against an old shed, surrounded by natural brush, with access to a heated shelter and a tall perch overlooking the trees. It wasn't captivity. It was sanctuary. They opened the crate door. The Bobcat stepped out slowly, one paw at a time, his body lean but strong again. He sniffed the ground, scanned the trees, then, shockingly, walked in a wide arc, straight toward the porch. He didn't climb the steps, but he stopped just short, looked up, and sat, like he had never left. Jamie stood at the window, his breath fogging the glass. Kitty's home, he whispered. They named him Shadow, not because he was dark or secretive, but because he had moved like one through their lives, quiet and unseen until the moment his presence changed everything. And now, he was part of them. Not a pet, not tamed, but trusted. That evening, Ava wrote in her journal, Day 11. Shadow is back, not under the porch now, but beside it, not hiding, but healing. Jamie doesn't question it. He just says hello, like he's greeting the sun. In the days ahead, the bond between the baby and the Bobcat would grow in ways no one could have imagined. All because one little boy whispered to the wild, and the wild whispered back. Shadow adapted to the sanctuary like he had been born to it. He patrolled the perimeter of the enclosure with silent grace, favoring the leg that had once been badly wounded but now moved with cautious strength. The enclosure opened into a run that curved through the woods behind the house, giving him the privacy of a forest edge and the safety of containment. But he didn't spend all his time out there. Every morning, without fail, Shadow padded across the clearing and sat at the edge of the porch, just a few feet from where Jamie would sit, cross-legged with his favorite blanket and stuffed bear. It was never dramatic. No purring. No scratching at the door, just presence. And that was enough. At first, Ava kept her distance during these porch encounters, watching from the kitchen window with Rusty curled at her feet, alert but no longer anxious. But she couldn't help noticing something incredible. Jamie didn't treat Shadow like a wild animal. He didn't talk to him like a pet. He communed with him like a friend. Every morning, Jamie would sit quietly, babbling in that toddler language full of half-formed words and emotion, and Shadow would simply listen. His ears would twitch, his tail would flick. Sometimes he'd blink slowly and stretch out in the sun while Jamie talked about toy trucks and juice cups and squirrels in the trees. It was as if they were having full conversations, just not in human language. And sometimes, Ava swore Shadow understood. One morning, Ava stepped outside with her coffee and sat on the steps, while Jamie and Shadow shared the space in silence. She didn't speak at first. She just watched. Jamie pointed at a cloud. "That one looks like you, Kitty." Shadow turned his head and followed the gesture. His gaze lingered on the sky, then returned to Jamie. The toddler giggled and offered him a crumpled leaf. Shadow sniffed it and blinked. "Best friend," Jamie said softly, and Shadow blinked again. That night, Ava wrote in her journal, Day 15. Jamie talks, Shadow listens, Shadow blinks, Jamie laughs. I used to think language was about words. Now I think it's about trust. Word began to spread in town, not through gossip or rumor, but through kindness. Jolene had shared Shadow's story with a few local wildlife volunteers, and slowly others began to ask questions. "How's the Bobcat? Is he still hanging around? I saw a kid sitting with him on the porch. Is that true?" Ava didn't post about it online. Didn't share photos. She wanted to protect the magic. But one evening at the local general store, an older woman named Edna approached Ava with a knowing smile. "My grandson was nonverbal until we got him a rescue cat. He didn't need words. He just needed to be heard. That's what your boy has with that Bobcat." Ava blinked. "You really think so?" Edna nodded. "Some souls find each other before they can speak." The bond deepened. Jamie began to wait for Shadow each morning. He would sit with a piece of toast in his hand, nibble half, then crumble the rest into his palm and hold it out like an offering. Shadow never took it. But he always came. And sat. And blinked. And stayed. One afternoon, Jamie stumbled as he ran across the yard, tripping over a stick and landing hard in the grass. He didn't cry. But Shadow, who had been lounging in the sun nearby, stood instantly. He didn't run to Jamie. Didn't pounce. But he moved slowly to his side, crouched down and watched, tail flicking, ears tilted. Jamie looked up, lip trembling. Then reached forward and rested his tiny hand on Shadow's paw. And Shadow let him. Just for a moment. Long enough to steady a small heart that had been startled by pain. Inside, Ava watched through the window, hand pressed over her mouth. It wasn't just a bond. It was something sacred. That evening, after Jamie fell asleep, curled up with his stuffed bear, Ava knelt beside Shadow's enclosure and whispered, "Thank you." Shadow looked at her, and for the first time, he purred. Not loud, not like a house cat, just a low, almost imperceptible hum deep in his chest. And Ava felt something bloom in her ribs she hadn't felt in a long, long time. Peace. She wrote that night. Day 18. I don't know who's healing who anymore. All I know is that the porch isn't empty, and the wild isn't scary. It's soft, because Jamie showed it how to be. By late spring, the entire rhythm of the Prescott household had shifted, slowly, gently, almost imperceptibly, around Shadow's presence. He wasn't a pet. He wasn't a project. He wasn't something to be fixed or owned. He was family. Every morning began the same. Jamie would wake up babbling into his blanket, and before breakfast, he'd toddle out to the front porch, still in his dinosaur pajamas, clutching a piece of banana or half a cracker in one hand. He'd sit at the top step and wait. And every morning, Shadow came. Not always right away. Sometimes from the trees, sometimes from the brush, once or twice from the edge of the woods where deer passed quietly in the dawn light. But he came. He always came. Ava started to notice something else too. Jamie's language was exploding. His sentences were getting clearer, his imagination more vivid. And nearly every story, every game, every bit of baby talk that came from his mouth involved Kitty Shadow. He'd say things like, Shadow says leaves are just tree shoes, or Shadow told me not to be afraid of loud birds. Or, quietly, Shadow said I can be brave. Ava never corrected him. Because what if it was true? One afternoon, Jolene stopped by to drop off a supply of flea powder and give Shadow a quick checkup through the enclosure gate. She watched the Bobcat saunter toward her, no longer limping, fur glossy under the sun. He's better than I ever expected, she said, crouching down. You've done something I've never seen before, Ava. I haven't done anything, Ava replied. Jamie did. Jolene smiled. Then Jamie did what adults forgot how to do. Later that evening, as the wind danced through the trees and golden light filtered through the windows, Jamie asked a question Ava wasn't expecting. Can Shadow come inside? She paused. The instinct was to say no. Of course not. He's a wild animal, dangerous, big, unpredictable. But before she could answer, Jamie added, he won't break anything. He's soft. Ava knelt down, met his gaze. Shadow belongs outside, sweetheart. That's where he's happiest. That's his safe place. Jamie nodded, thoughtful. Okay, he said. And then, as if it made perfect sense, then I'll play outside with him forever. The next day, Ava brought home a wooden bench and placed it under the porch roof. She added a few soft cushions and a little side table. It became their new sitting spot. Every morning, Jamie sat on the bench with his sippy cup. Every evening, Ava sat there with a mug of tea while Shadow rested a few yards away, eyes half closed, listening to the wind. They were never closer than necessary, but never farther than they needed to be. Then something unexpected happened. A letter arrived. It was from the town council. Apparently, someone had reported a bobcat roaming too close to human homes. The letter wasn't accusatory, but it warned that wild animal sightings near residences could prompt wildlife relocation, or in worse cases, removal. Ava's stomach twisted. They didn't know. They didn't see. She called Jolene in a panic. They can't take him, she said. He's not a threat. He's healed. He chose to stay here. I know, Jolene said calmly, but not everyone understands. So what do we do? There was a pause. Then Jolene said, we show them. The next week, Ava wrote an article for the town newspaper. The Bobcat on My Porch was the title. It wasn't a defense, it was a story. She wrote about Shadow's injury, about how he chose to stay, about the quiet mornings with her son, about kindness, about healing, about how sometimes the wild isn't something to be feared. It's something that just needs space to breathe. She didn't ask for anything. She just told the truth. The response was overwhelming. Letters poured in. Neighbors stopped her at the market. One man offered to build Shadow a sturdier shelter for the coming winter. A retired teacher mailed a hand-painted sign that read, "Wild welcome Shadow's porch." Even the town council sent a reply, "Thank you for helping us see what others miss. We've closed the complaint and consider Shadow a resident of the community, under your watch." That night, Ava sat on the bench with Jamie in her lap, the stars blooming in the sky above. Shadow lay just beyond the porch light, his shape a silhouette of stillness and grace. And Ava whispered, "Thank you for staying." Shadow lifted his head and blinked. In her journal she wrote, Day 25. Sometimes healing is silent. Sometimes it walks on four paws and speaks through toddlers. But when you listen, everything changes. Summer deepened, and with it came a new kind of magic. The kind you can't plan for. The kind that just happens. Like fireflies blinking along the fence line, like warm wind through an open window, like a boy and a bobcat learning to trust the world, together. Jamie turned 2 that July. The backyard was strung with paper lanterns and laughter. Just a small gathering, Jolene, a few neighbours, and Ava's sister Molly, who had flown in with her 2 young kids. Everyone had heard of Shadow, but not everyone had seen him. Not in the way Jamie had. So when the bobcat padded into the clearing around the 3rd cupcake, heads turned and voices fell silent. Shadow walked to his usual spot, just beyond the porch, where the edge of wild met the edge of home, and lay down. Not hidden. Not threatening. Just there, watching the celebration. Being part of it. Molly's daughter, 6 years old and timid, stood behind Ava and whispered, "Is that the bobcat?" Ava nodded. "That's Shadow. Is he safe?" Jamie, hearing the question, turned around with a mouthful of frosting and said, "He's my kitty." Molly laughed nervously, but the tension didn't last. Because Shadow didn't flinch. Didn't growl, didn't do anything really. Just stayed. As if to say, this joy, this family, I belong here too. Jolene walked over, knelt beside Shadow at a respectful distance and gave him a soft nod. "You came to the party," she said. Shadow blinked, eyes like gold coins under the moonlight. And for the first time, he let her reach out and touch his shoulder. Just once. Just enough. Later that night, after everyone had gone and the stars shimmered overhead, Ava tucked Jamie into bed and sat out on the porch alone. Shadow lay nearby, not on the prowl, not guarding, just keeping company. She reached for her journal and wrote, Day 30. Jamie is 2. Shadow came to his party. I think he understands milestones. Or maybe he just understands love. A few days later, Ava noticed something new. Jamie wasn't just talking to Shadow anymore. He was talking like Shadow. His voice changed when they were together, lower, slower, more intentional. He whispered instead of shouted. He moved gently instead of racing. He paused more, listened more. It was as though he'd absorbed the rhythm of the bobcat. And somehow, it made him wiser than his years. One morning, while Ava was hanging laundry on the line, she overheard Jamie kneeling in the grass beside Shadow. Sometimes, he said softly, I feel too much. Shadow didn't move. Jamie continued, I feel when Rusty's sad, and when Mama's tired, and when the sky's going to cry. Ava froze, holding a clothespin in midair. And I don't know where to put it, Jamie said. All the feelings. Shadow exhaled a slow breath and shifted his weight, resting his chin on his paws. Jamie reached out, gently, respectfully, and placed his small hand on the ground between them. Do you feel too much too? Shadow didn't answer, but he didn't leave, and that was the answer. Ava later wrote, Day 33. Some kids talk to stuffed animals, Mine talks to a predator, and somehow it's safer than anything I've ever known. The following week, a small article ran in the local paper about Shadow's continued recovery. The headline read, "Pine Hollow Silent Guardian, a Bobcat named Shadow." It wasn't sensational. It was reverent. And it brought with it something new. Letters. Not complaints, not concerns, but thank you notes. From veterans struggling with PTSD who said they found comfort in Shadow's stillness. From mothers of shy children who asked if they could visit and see Jamie and Shadow together. From a man who wrote, "I lost my wife last year. Watching the boy and that Bobcat reminded me how to keep showing up." Ava printed each letter and kept them in a box by her desk. She hadn't asked for a movement, but one had begun. Shadow, of course, didn't know any of this. He still came in the mornings, still watched the sunset in the evenings, still blinked at Jamie like he was the only voice worth listening to. He didn't need fanfare, just a porch, and a little boy with an open heart. That night, Ava stood in the doorway and whispered, "You're teaching the town how to be gentle, you know." Shadow turned his head, held her gaze, and for a brief, stunning second, she believed he understood. August arrived with thunderheads and thick, humming air, the kind of summer heat that made even the birds go quiet in the afternoons. But not Jamie, and not Shadow. Every day the boy and the Bobcat met on the porch like clockwork. It didn't matter how hot it was or if the clouds rolled in grumbling above the treetops. Shadow always showed up. And Jamie always waited. They didn't play in the traditional sense. There were no toys, no running, no fetch. Their play was subtler. A game of stillness, a communion of presence, a sacred rhythm only they understood. One evening, as thunder rumbled low in the distance, Ava watched from the kitchen as Jamie crouched beside Shadow with a drawing in his hand. Crayons scattered around him like fallen petals. He held up the picture. It was stick figures, Jamie, Ava, Rusty, and beside them a large cat with triangle ears and golden eyes. Jamie had written, in big, crooked letters, "Family." Shadow sniffed the paper. Then, deliberately, placed one paw on the corner. Jamie beamed. "See? You're part too." That night the storm broke. Rain lashed the roof, and wind howled through the trees. Ava paced the living room, uneasy. She peeked through the window toward the back enclosure, hoping Shadow had returned to his shelter. But Rusty barked at the front door. Jamie stirred in his bed. And then, a thump. A soft, wet thump on the porch. Ava flicked on the light and opened the door. Shadow stood there, soaked, his fur heavy with rain. He didn't bolt. He didn't growl. He just stood there, blinking through the downpour. Ava stepped aside. Shadow padded in. It wasn't planned. It wasn't expected, but in that moment, as thunder cracked across the valley and a small boy rushed down the hall whispering, "Shadow," the Bobcat walked across the threshold like he'd always belonged. He didn't explore. He didn't sniff furniture. He simply lay down on the rug, shook once, and closed his eyes. Like a weary traveler, finally allowed to rest. Jamie curled beside him with his blanket, thumb in his mouth, the way he always did when something big was happening in his little heart. And Ava, she just knelt beside them and wept. Not from fear, not even from awe, but from something deeper, something she didn't have a name for yet. The next morning, Shadow was gone, slipped out sometime before dawn. But the paw prints on the porch told the story. He had come in when it mattered, trusted them when it counted, and returned to his woods when the world calmed down. Jolene visited later that week to check the enclosure. When Ava told her what had happened, the woman just smiled and said, "Animals know where safety lives. He knew your house had it." Ava looked toward the porch. "Do you think he'll do it again?" Jolene shrugged.
only if you need him, or maybe only if he does. A few days later, a surprise visitor arrived. A reporter from the regional news station. She'd read the town paper's piece and wanted to do a short feature for their Kindness in the Wild series. A human interest spot, she said. 5 minutes, tops. Ava hesitated. The last thing she wanted was to sensationalize what had happened. Shadow wasn't a mascot. He wasn't a viral story. He was a being, deep, complex, and sacred to their family. But Jamie had already drawn pictures for the reporter and made a sign that read, "Shadow's porch, sit quietly." So Ava said yes.
The crew arrived small, a cameraman, a producer, and the soft-spoken reporter named Lila. They filmed Jamie and Rusty playing in the yard, Ava walking through the woods, Jolene describing Shadow's early injury and recovery. Then finally, they sat on the porch. As the camera rolled, Lila asked, "Do you think Shadow understands what he means to your family?" Ava looked down at the worn wooden planks where the Bobcat's paw prints had dried days ago. "I think he understands more than we ever will." Just as they were wrapping up, the cameraman whispered sharply, "Look." Everyone turned. From the trees, moving slow and silent as dusk, Shadow appeared. He didn't run, didn't hide. He padded into view, stopped at the edge of the clearing, and sat. His eyes caught the last rays of sunlight. Lila whispered, "Is this real?" Jamie stood, held up the drawing again, the same one as before. "Hi, Shadow." The Bobcat blinked and stayed. That clip made it into the final cut of the segment. When it aired 2 nights later, it was shared over 1 million times in just 1 week. People weren't just watching. They were feeling something deep, something ancient, something wild and good and gentle. Ava didn't chase it, didn't lean into the fame. But the messages poured in. Letters from children, notes from trauma survivors, parents of shy, sensitive kids. One read, "My daughter hasn't spoken in weeks, but when she watched the clip of your boy and that Bobcat, she whispered, 'I want a friend like that. Thank you for reminding us that connection doesn't need words.'" That night, Ava wrote, Day 39. The world saw him, and for a moment, they listened, not to the roar of the wild, but to the whisper of trust. September arrived quietly, brushing golden fingers across the tops of trees and ushering in a softer kind of sunlight. The mornings were cooler now. Mist hovered just above the ground. Pine Hollow was beginning its slow, beautiful surrender to autumn. And still, every morning, Shadow came. And Jamie waited. The news segment had faded from the headlines, but not from people's hearts. Every few days, Ava received new messages, some long, some just a few words. Many from parents whose children had connected to the story in ways no one expected. Some asked if they could visit. Others simply wanted to say thank you. But the most unexpected message came from a teacher at a school for children with emotional and behavioral challenges located 2 counties over. Her email read, "Would Jamie and Shadow ever be open to visiting? Not for a presentation, just presence. Some of our kids don't speak, some won't sit in circle time, but they all watched your story, and they all sat, every single one of them sat. That's never happened before." Ava read the message twice. She didn't answer right away. She walked out to the porch, sat on the top step, and looked toward the woods. Shadow was there, not close, but not far, just watching. She whispered into the breeze, "Would you go with us?" Shadow's tail twitched once. Then he turned and padded back into the trees. Not a no, not a yes, just maybe. When she told Jamie about the invitation, he tilted his head and said, "Will they have leaves?" Ava blinked. "Leaves? Shadow likes to sit in leaves." She smiled. "Then we'll make sure they do."
Jolene offered to help with logistics. She had a transport crate Shadow was familiar with, and she assured Ava that short, gentle trips with the right intention could be more healing than disruptive. "He'll know," Jolene said. "If it's right. If it isn't, he won't go." The day of the visit, the air was crisp and clear. Shadow walked into the crate without protest.
No sedation, no coaxing, just walked in, turned around and lay down. Ava stood there, stunned. Jolene just smiled. He's ready. The school was tucked into a quiet grove at the edge of town, surrounded by oaks and maples. As they arrived, children peeked through the windows with wide eyes and pressed palms. Shadow stayed calm. Even in a strange place. Even with strangers nearby. Jamie, wearing his favorite green jacket, held Ava's hand tight and whispered, "He's not scared." And he wasn't. He was anchored. They brought Shadow into a shaded, fenced-in outdoor area. Blankets had been laid out. Teachers waited nearby, watchful but trusting. And one by one, the children came. Not all at once, not loudly, but drawn like magnets. They sat in a wide circle, some whispering, some rocking back and forth. Shadow lay in the center, eyes half closed, ears flicking gently. Jamie sat beside him, said nothing, just leaned close, hands in his lap, and waited. After several minutes, a girl named Lila, curly-haired, non-verbal, usually unengaged, stood. She walked slowly, then knelt beside Shadow. Everyone held their breath. She reached out and touched his back. Shadow didn't move, didn't flinch. He blinked. Lila sat down and began to hum, soft, melodic, like a lullaby for the wild. A few minutes later, a boy who hadn't made eye contact with his teacher in weeks leaned into the fence and whispered, "I wish he could come live with me." Another child wrote on a small whiteboard, "The cat makes my chest quiet." And one girl simply said, "He looks like a poem." Ava watched it unfold like a dream. Shadow didn't perform. Didn't need to. He just was. And that was the miracle. Afterward, the school's director approached Ava, voice thick with emotion. "We've tried everything, therapy dogs, art, music. All of it helps, but this was presence. Not just calm, not just quiet. It was acceptance. He met them where they were." Ava nodded. "That's what he's always done." The director said, "So is your son." On the drive home, Jamie was unusually quiet in the back seat. Ava glanced in the mirror. "You okay, baby?" He nodded. They needed Shadow. A beat. Then he added, "I think he's magic." Ava smiled. "I think he is too." Back home, Shadow stepped out of the crate, stretched slowly and padded to the edge of the trees. But instead of disappearing, he turned back and lay down beside the porch, as if to say, "I'm still yours." That night, Ava sat at the window and wrote, "Day 48. He doesn't rescue with teeth or claws. He rescues with stillness, with presence, with choosing to stay. Some angels come with wings, some with fur, some with silence." Autumn painted Pine Hollow in gold and rust, each leaf a quiet farewell to summer. The porch creaked under the weight of fallen acorns, and the wind had begun to carry the crisp bite of winter's approach. But nothing changed the morning rhythm. Every day, Jamie bundled in his puffy jacket and mittens, toddled out with his apple slices or peanut butter toast and waited. And every day, Shadow came. Now slower, now more careful, but still there. Ava noticed Shadow's movements had grown more deliberate. He wasn't injured, not like before, but age was catching up with him. His strides were measured. He lay down more often, spent longer stretches in the patch of sun beside the porch, blinking at the birds like he was counting them. Jamie noticed too. One morning, he crouched beside Shadow and whispered, "Is your body tired?" Shadow didn't answer, of course. But he nudged his head closer to Jamie's knee and closed his eyes. The boy nodded solemnly. as if he understood something far older than his years. That afternoon, while Jamie napped and the house lay still, Ava sat beside Shadow on the porch steps. She had brought her journal, but she didn't write. She just watched him. The way his sides rose and fell in rhythm with the breeze. The way his eyes, half-lidded, watched the trees like he'd seen them grow inch by inch. She whispered, "Are you getting ready to leave?" Shadow didn't move, didn't blink. But something in the air shifted, like a breath held, a promise waiting. A few days later, Ava received another letter. Not from a stranger. From a school counselor in town, a woman who had brought her students to meet Shadow a month earlier. One of my boys, Marcus, was in a dark place. He didn't say a word for days, but after he sat with Shadow, he started talking. Not just to us, to himself. He said, "If the wildcat can be soft, I can too." We're wondering, could Shadow come once more? Just one more visit. Quiet. No cameras. Just presence. Ava read the letter 3 times. Then she called Jolene. That weekend they made the trip again, Jamie in the back seat with his drawing supplies and Shadow in the crate, calm as ever. This time, the visit was brief. Just a small group of 6 children. They sat in a circle. No talking, no pressure. Jamie sat beside Shadow with a crayon in his hand and drew a picture of a big brown cat and a small boy holding hands. Shadow lay still, tail flicking now and then, and the children just watched. A few smiled. One teared up. And Marcus, the boy the counselor had written about, stood slowly, walked to the center, and placed a pine cone gently beside Shadow's paw. Then he whispered, "Thank you." Shadow blinked. Jamie whispered back, "You're welcome." On the way home, Shadow leaned into the crate's edge more than usual, as if feeling every bump in the road. Jamie reached through the opening and rested a mittened hand on his fur. "Almost home," he said. Shadow closed his eyes. Back at the farmhouse, things felt softer. The leaves fell faster now. The sunsets came sooner. Even Rusty had grown quieter, often lying beside Shadow in the grass. 2 creatures that once might have been enemies, now warm with understanding. Ava found herself reflecting more. Watching Jamie and Shadow together made her wonder about unseen things, about the world between what we say and what we feel, about the space where wild things find peace. One night, Ava sat on the porch with a blanket around her shoulders and her journal in her lap. Shadow lay at her feet. Jamie slept inside, hugging his bear in a crumpled drawing of the 2 of them. The stars blinked overhead, and Ava wrote, "Day 56. We never named him. He named himself. Shadow, the quiet one. Shadow, the listener. Shadow, the soft guardian of our boy's heart." The next morning, Ava opened the door as usual and stepped out with Jamie in tow. But Shadow wasn't there. Jamie blinked, then stepped forward, craning his neck toward the woods. "Shadow," he called. Silence. Just wind in the trees. Just leaves falling. Ava swallowed. Jamie turned and said, "He's not gone." She knelt beside him. "How do you know?" Jamie smiled and tapped his chest. "He's in here now." Then he looked toward the woods. "He'll come back when he's ready." That day passed, then another. Still no Shadow. But the porch didn't feel empty, and Jamie didn't cry, because somehow they both understood. The wild comes when it's needed, and leaves when it's time. Winter crept in slowly, dusting Pine Hollow in frost and silence. The trees stood bare, their branches stretched toward pale skies, and smoke drifted lazily from chimneys around town. The warmth of autumn had faded, and with it Shadow had slipped back into the woods like a ghost with golden eyes. Days passed, then weeks, Still no sign of him. But inside the blue farmhouse on the hill, no one gave in to sadness. Because Shadow had never belonged to them. He had chosen them. And that choice lived on, no matter how deep the snow. Jamie still brought food to the porch every morning. Not much, just a small plate with an apple slice or bit of bread. He'd set it down with great care, whispering something only he and the wind could hear. Rusty sat beside him, tail thumping gently. Ava watched from the doorway, a mug of tea warming her hands. "Do you miss him?" she asked one morning. Jamie nodded, eyes on the woods. "But missing is just love remembering," he said. Ava blinked. Where had he heard that? But Jamie only smiled and whispered again toward the trees, "Come back when you're ready." One evening, as Christmas lights glowed softly across windows and the town square lit its towering fir tree, Ava bundled Jamie into his coat and scarf and took him to the back of the property. They stood near Shadow's old enclosure. It hadn't been used in weeks, but Ava couldn't bring herself to tear it down. "I want to put something here," she said. "Something for Shadow." Jamie clapped his hands and said, "A picture." He pulled a crumpled sheet from his jacket pocket. It showed a stick figure boy and a large cat sitting on a porch together under a big yellow sun. "We can make it forever," Jamie said. "So he remembers." Ava and Will built a small wooden sign. They painted it navy blue with soft white lettering and placed it beside the enclosure. It read, "Shadow's Place, where wild meets wonder." Beneath it, they fastened Jamie's drawing in a weatherproof frame. And beneath that, Ava placed a single sentence. "He came quietly. He stayed bravely. He left when he was ready." Winter deepened. Snow fell. The town hushed. And on Christmas morning something changed. Jamie woke early, earlier than usual, and ran straight to the window. His breath fogged the glass as he pressed his face to it. "Mama!" he called. "He came!" Ava rushed in, heart racing. She followed Jamie's outstretched finger, and there, on the porch, lay a single pine cone. Perfect, untouched, placed right where Jamie always left Shadow's food. No tracks in the snow, no paw prints. Just that pine cone. And beside it, 3 long grey hairs caught on a porch rail. Ava opened the door, stepped into the snow, and picked up the pine cone. She held it close to her chest. Jamie stood beside her, smiling. "Told you he'd come back." They never saw him again. Not fully. But sometimes at night, when the stars were bright and the woods stood still, Ava would catch a glint of amber deep among the trees. Just for a second. Just long enough to know. Shadow was watching. Still keeping guard. Still listening. The following spring, something extraordinary happened. A new animal appeared at the edge of the woods. A young bobcat, smaller, sleeker, with the same tufted ears and golden eyes. At first, Ava feared it was coincidence. But then it began showing up every morning, sitting near the porch, watching Jamie. Not close, not ready, but familiar. Jamie stood at the edge of the porch, holding a new drawing in his hands. "Maybe it's his baby," he whispered. "Maybe," Ava replied. Jamie set the picture down gently on the porch. A small gift for the next chapter. That night, Ava wrote the final page in her journal. Day 100. Shadow came to us broken. We gave him safety. He gave us healing. And now, even in absence, he remains. In quiet, in kindness, in every heartbeat of our son. Some stories never really end. They become part of the land, part of the porch, part of us. And if you ever find yourself walking past a quiet farmhouse in Pine Hollow, look carefully at the porch. You just might see a pine cone placed gently near the steps. And if you're still enough, you just might feel a presence watching over you, not with fear, but with trust. Shadow didn't stay because he had to. He stayed because he chose to. A wounded wildcat and a fearless toddler found each other in the unlikeliest way, and in that quiet bond, they rewrote the rules of what it means to trust, to heal, and to love without limits. And even when Shadow disappeared back into the forest, his presence never truly left, because sometimes the softest friendships leave the loudest echoes in our hearts. If this story moved you, please subscribe to Pawprints Forever for more true stories that celebrate the powerful connections between animals and the people who believe in them. Like the video, if it touched your heart, share it with someone who still believes in the magic of kindness, and comment below. What part of this story stayed with you the most? Thank you for watching. Thank you for listening. And remember, sometimes
all it takes to change a life is a child who isn't afraid to reach out.